Hey, I can't believe we're doing this for the last time this season. No, it's cool.
I know.
Dearest fantasy readers, welcome to the Dear Fantasy Reader podcast, where two best friends, Hannah and Karen, travel through the pages of our favorite romantasy novels. Join us as we take flight into the world of the Empyrean series, diving deep into the chapters, exploring characters, scenes, theories, foreshadowing, and more, taking what we've learned from the second book, Iron Flame, to reread and re-experience the first.
With that content warning and spoiler alert, we will be covering anything and everything Empyrean series to this date and any content Rebecca Yarros has given us. Also, due to the nature of these books, this podcast is rated R in content and in language.
As Rebecca Yarros says, readers who may be sensitive to these elements, please take note and prepare to enter Basgiath War College. Surprise! Guys, this is actually our last Fourth Wing episode. That means that instead of just covering chapter 36 like we had said we were going to last week, we are actually going to be covering chapters 36 through 39.
Wow.
All here, all today. Which, fair warning, does make it a longer episode, but it will give us just a little more time to reread Iron Flame so that we can start working on our Onyx Storm preparation episodes, which I cannot wait to get my hands deep into.
Same.
We do have a few ideas for what those bonus episodes will look like in this, like, I don't even what we keep calling it like a miscellaneous season in between before our next like official season for Onyx Storm. We have a couple ideas for what those bonus episodes will look like, including an everything we know going into Onyx Storm episode and everything Rebecca Yarros has said in interviews about Onyx Storm episode, a theories episode, and of course, leaving room for bonus episodes if Rebecca throws any more big things our way. And I do suspect that she will release an Iron Flame Holiday Edition with bonus Xaden POV chapters. So,
oh my gosh,
it's things like that we will want to leave space for.
The best place to get update notifications would be our new Instagram broadcast channel and our Discord server, since this mini season is going to be a bit less structured in the nature than this season has been.
Right. And transparently, we are going to use this time to read some other books. We've been in the Empyrean world nonstop for months now. Possibly also have some authors on for interview Q&A style episodes. Wink, wink. Be on the lookout for an announcement soon. Just prefacing that Rebecca Yarros does not do podcast episodes. So it is not Rebecca Yarros. It would be other books / will be. Wink, 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 wink. Maybe collaborating with other book podcasts in the meantime. Who knows? And to really just figure out what we want this podcast to look like as we grow. If you guys have any ideas or requests for episodes or even what you would like to see from our podcast in general, we more than welcome your thoughts, as always. Now, we are an independently funded podcast, which means that we are paying out of pocket for all operations. So we are looking at ways that can help us at least cover necessary expenses in order to continue the podcast. To be entirely honest, I hate with a passion talking about money, but I love working on this podcast. So we would really like to continue making it, and that just comes along with it. So we will be ironing out our Patreon, which does have a $3 base level to show support, and of course, higher levels with perks. So if you are enjoying our podcast so far and would like for it to continue, please consider checking out our Patreon. We will also be releasing merch here soon. And yes, if you're watching on YouTube or Spotify, I am wearing one of the samples that we were sent, and it is adorable.
So cute.
I'm obsessed. We will offer several variations of it, both in our pink, purple, and gold, like what I'm wearing, and more simple alternatives. But there are free ways to support us as well. Subscribing on podcast platforms, YouTube, and leaving reviews helps to push our pod out to more eyes, which opens up the opportunity for download revenue. Also, sharing this podcast with anyone you know or are trying to get into reading Fourth Wing and loving it as much as we do. Also a perfect opportunity to support us.
Echoing everything you said, we also have so many fun things coming up and that are in store for us and this podcast. And one of those is that Hannah and I are going to be at the Dance of the Dragon Con Veil of Scales Market this weekend. And we will be posting all about our experience over on Instagram and TikTok. So please follow along if you want to check that out.
Also in our Discord, I'm sure you guys, you got the first peek at the merch in the Discord chat, wink, wink. Can we just take a moment to talk about how adorable the Dance of the Dragon Con Veil of Scales Market name is?
It's so cute.
So cute.
I'm so excited. Oh my gosh.
And one last and most important thing before we dive into our last Fourth Wing episode, Karen and I would like to thank each and every one of you for taking the time out of your lives to listen and support us as we yap so in depth about this book and the series. We truly just cannot say how much it means to both of us that you listen, send messages with your thoughts and theories, leave such kind and magical reviews, and just enjoy the content that we're creating. I will not cry. I'm just really, really excited to see how our pod and community will grow and evolve even more after this first season. And just thank you. Thank each of you for flying this journey with us.
Yes, we would never have been able to continue on with this podcast without each and every one of you. And I also cannot wait to keep reading and discussing some of our favorite romantasy books with you guys. Again, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, now time for our summary report of chapters 36 through 39 from our personal scribe informant, Karen. Now, heads up, this is a long one because so much happens and it is 4 chapters of the end of the book.
Ooh, buckle up. The riders are given a choice by Colonel Atos' missive. They can leave now, allowing them to make it to the new headquarters for Fourth Wing at Eltuval in time to carry out the orders for the war games, or they can stay and defend the trading post and its more than 300 innocent civilians from the venom. Liam uses his Farsight signet and spots 5 venom, and though they have 10 dragon riders and 7 griffin flyers, 5 venom are practically a death sentence. Xaden leaves the choice to fight up to each rider. Violet agrees she will not leave defenseless civilians to die. Violet sends Andarna to hide, heartbreakingly instructing her to leave the moment she knows there is no hope left. Suddenly, they spot 2-legged creatures flying for resin, wyvern, abominations created by the venom to compete with dragons. Instead of channeling power from them like a rider does a dragon, the venom channel power into the wyvern. The dragons have lost their air superiority. Violet and Taryn fly into action. They continue to fend off wyvern as Xaden instructs her to cover Garrick and Bodhi so they can get the townspeople evacuated through a sealed mine. Violet summons lightning toward a venom who snaps their attention to Violet before bringing down part of the mountainside. Soleil shields them from the falling boulders and the venom begins channeling power from the earth, sending a wave of death around her, reaching Soleil and her dragon and killing them both instantly. Violet is able to draw Wyvern out by wielding lightning, but struggling to aim. She gets distracted out of fear for Xaden and doesn't see the wyvern is about to take a bite out of Terran's side before the gale savagely swoops in and saves him. Whew. Violet then spies Liam and Day flying hard and fast away from a wyvern with a venom rider. Violet and Terran rush to help as Liam skillfully jumps off Day onto the wyvern, slashing the venom's throat. The wyvern immediately dies and Day catches Liam. Just then, another wyvern drops in from above, seconds away from killing Terran before a flash of red collides into it. The collision sends Liam hurtling off Day's back and onto the base of Terran's neck as Violet grabs hold of him. Liam, barely hanging on, explains that Violet saved his life, so now he has saved hers, and that they are friends. Oh gosh, don't cry. Ooh. Day is still locked in a horrified and tangled dive with the wyvern, and Violet can't do anything to help without killing Day too. There is nothing Violet can do but watch as Terran does his best to get the wyvern to let go as Liam screams for Day, trying to touch him one last time. The wyvern is relentless, holding Day in a death grip as they crash into the hillside. And Liam, Terran, and Indarna all cry out. A dragon without its rider is a tragedy. A rider without their dragon is dead. Oh my gosh. Ooh. Liked myself. Okay.
Oh my god. Though even the description, and that's like just summary.
Oh my
so
gosh.
much worse in the book. Okay.
Violet struggles to get Liam over to Day so he can be with him in the last few minutes he has left, but they can't physically make it. Violet begins to beg Liam to stay alive. He tells her that she has to take care of his sister Sloane when she enters the Rider's Quadrant. Violet promises that she will, and Liam tells her to hear Xaden out. She thanks him for being her shadow, her friend. And we get what is the best and absolute worst line from the whole book. It's been my honor.
Wait, no. We got to do it justice. It's been my honor. Oh,
I'm just trying to make it through. Xaden arrives and carries Liam, his brother, over to Day as he says his goodbyes. Xaden's shadows whip out in menace and sorrow as his soundless, soul-wrenching scream filled Violet's head. Our good and perfect Liam is gone. The battle doesn't yield to the heartbreak as a horde of wyvern are headed their way, and Xaden relays Liam's last message for Violet. She has to take out the two venom, and the wyvern will die too. Back in the sky, Violet's aim succeeds, killing one of the wyvern, but she doesn't see the one coming from the left until Terran roars out in pain. A venom has stabbed him with a sword and is now on his back. Ooh, sorry. I got emotional and I feel like I need a second.
It's okay.
We both are. Violet fights the venom, but is stabbed in the side with a poison-tipped dagger. Xaden evens the playing field by throwing shadows around them, blacking out everything but Violet's lightning. Violet kills the venom with her alloy-hilted dagger, and the three wyvern die, just like Liam said. Violet asks Terran to determine the most powerful rider, knowing she only has enough left in her to take one out. Together with Terran channeling a burnout level of power, Indarna freezes time, and Violet, risking it all to save her friends as she battles burnout and poison, strikes the venom general with a bolt of lightning, killing him.
Ooh.
As time resumes again, another wyvern barrels toward Violet and Taryn, but Xaden throws his shadows up, wrapping them around the Venon's neck as he stabs him with his dagger, killing him.
That's so hot.
So hot. Gosh. Knowing everyone will live now, Violet lets herself slide off Taryn's back. And Darna, unable to physically hold Violet, slows time with what little strength she has left, trying to break Violet's fall. When time starts again, Xaden gathers her in his arms, realizing that she was stabbed with a poison-tipped blade, which has caused her blood to turn black. They discuss taking her to Nolan back at Basgiath, but that is a 12-hour flight away and Violet won't survive that long. Xaden says they are taking her to someone closer, no matter the risk. 3 days pass with Xaden at Violet's side, full of guilt, regret, and fear, and Violet finally wakes up. At first, Violet doesn't remember what happened, but the memories flood back quickly. Taryn is okay, and Darna as well, though she isn't quite the same, but Liam was laid to rest the day before. Violet realizes she is in Orisha, the city that Navarre burned after the rebellion, and Xaden tells her they have been rebuilding it on the down low. Xaden assures Violet that he will tell her anything she wants to know, and she kicks him out to shower. Xaden speaks with Garrick and Bodhi, who tell him that Serena and her sister were the only surviving Griffin riders. Later, Xaden asks Violet if she is willing to fight with them, knowing everything she does now. She says that she is in, but doesn't trust him. Xaden finally admits that he fell for her, and that while she might not trust him, he knows that she still loves him, and he will spend every day of his life earning back her trust. Suddenly, there's a knock at the door, and her brother, Brennan, who she thought was dead, welcomes her to the revolution.
Cliffhanger! Part of our decision initially to just cover chapter 36 was like, how do you talk about Liam's death and then keep moving?
Yeah.
But the reality was that that's what Violet had to do. Right? Like that's even you were like, how am I pause? I need a second. How am I supposed to say? But Violet does, right? Like it happens and then bam, she's still in battle, which is super symbolic, right?
Right. Even trying to get through the summary, I can't.
No, but my tears weren't as bad at the end as they were during that part. So progress.
No, I was holding it together until I looked at you and then I was like, oh gosh.
Sorry. I was trying so hard not to. I thought I would at least make it like to when we actually talked about it, but nope.
Right.
Nope. Watching you describe it. Oh, okay. Drum roll, Dragon Riders, as we are officially talking about the chaos that is the last 4 chapters of this book. Diving right into our analysis and discussion section. Let's start with how Colonel Atos has given them a proposition in his missive. Xaden is the wing leader, and as part of the final War Games event, he is supposed to command each part of his wing from a new location, Elteval. So, all sections of his wing are in position waiting for direction from Xaden. But there are Venon that have been lured to Resin by Atos, who are attacking innocent civilians. So, Xaden and his hand-selected squad must choose between leaving and fulfilling their duty in the name of loyalty as a wing leader. That's nuts. Or helping more than 300 innocent civilians right in front of them. It's a horrific test of loyalty that I am so glad that they failed.
Same. I don't think any of them would have been able to live with themselves if they had just left all of those innocent people to die. But what a horrible position to put these kids in, essentially.
And we don't say kids condescendingly, right? Like early 20s. Like I'm I keep saying 25, 26. I still feel like I'm a kid. That is not a situation that people who are still like in training, right, should be forced to. But then again, like they were reprimanded and almost executed for their parents' sins, right? So, whatever. So, Navarre doesn't have a great track record at all with considering that to begin with.
No.
And they also have a whole quadrant where they like send people to die. So they really don't value life anyway, which is very clear in this proposition. And that really puts things into perspective, right? Just because something is a law or a rule doesn't make it moral or right. And I think that that's a really important lesson that this book and these characters demonstrate the nuances of really well, along with how important it is to be critical of the things that we're told and taught.
Absolutely.
Think of Violet's view on the marked ones in the very first chapter. Yet they are the ones willing to risk it all to help others now. So sometimes things are not as they seem.
Exactly. They have the integrity that she thought Navarre had. And I love a story like this where no one is who you expect them to be at the beginning.
Oh, yeah. Well, especially since Colonel Athos was the one way back when showing Violet some level of kindness or understanding, maybe sympathy for when her mom was being harsh to her. Yet, out of the two of them, he was the actual villain.
Oh, good point.
Interesting to think about, huh?
Yeah.
Even though she's still very much so morally gray. I can't really consider her not necessarily a villain, but well, I think she's also a villain too. Like, what is that called? A Freudian slip?
Yeah.
She's a villain. Not really, Athos is clearly that for this book, aside of our venom villains. That's a tongue twister. And this is when we really see Papa Sorrengail's efforts to prepare Violet as best he can realized, though I am sure he never expected Violet to be face-to-face with them because he didn't expect her to be in the Writer's Quadrant, right?
Yeah.
But she is somewhat equipped to handle this more than the rest of them because she had insights from the Book of the Fables that he read her as a child, and he left that letter in, so she knows about the wyvern.
Oh my gosh, it would have been such an even more unwelcome surprise for everyone had she not known. Like, though Xaden is right later when he says that she could have prepared them all before this had he just told her about the venom.
Right? I think he actually had some nice self-awareness in his last chapter, which I'm excited to cover. I would like to talk about the venom wyvern thing. I find it so intriguing that their dynamic is opposite rider-dragon. Yeah. So a dragon dies and a rider dies with them, but for venom, they are the source of the power, so the wyvern die, the venom die, and not the other way around, which, of course, the main difference that we know of is that dragons don't create riders. So I think it's really cool that we see that contrast in the magic system and that it was pointed out directly by Tairn, which only feels like really cruel foreshadowing just pages before we see perfectly fine and healthy Liam die because his dragon did. Which is awful.
Ignoring that part. I also love the way that this is set up because with so many wyvern, they're extremely outnumbered. So killing the creator helps them have some sort of fighting chance.
Right. Well, and we talked about this a bit last episode, but these kids, essentially, like Violet has 1 year of training and they haven't slept and she can't aim. So they needed some sort of evening the playing field. Let's talk about Sgail. I know Violet just blows past this entire part of the scene, but I love it. Her telling Violet, quote, "I knew you'd make the right choice." And, quote, "You're a far cry from the trembling girl who stood in the courtyard and tried to mask her fear after parapet. I approve." That was so meaningful to me. And while Violet wasn't fazed by it at all, it's huge for Sgail to say that. And it made me so happy. We don't get a lot of Sgail we know she's ruthless.
Mm-hmm.
But that was such a big moment for her character.
Right. It made me so happy too. And it's such a big deal because Sigale's talking directly to Violet.
Right.
Super rare honor.
Mm-hmm.
And she's giving her approval because of how much she has grown in all aspects since first coming to Basgiath. And that she approves of her for Xaden. And even more importantly, she approves and thinks she's good enough for her mate.
Oh, that right there. Okay, well, okay, that made me cry.
Hannah's going to be crying this whole episode.
It's so good. On my first read, I was like, I approve would be Xaden. But then you think about, she knows her mate is tied to this trembling girl. That's got to be terrifying. And so now she's like, that's the strength that he saw in you.
He was right.
That level of sentiment from her just speaks volumes. And again, giving Violet a little bit of credit for her reaction here. She's had a hell of a last few hours.
Oh my gosh. Literally no one or anything took it easy on Violet here.
No.
And it's been hit after hit after hit.
After hit. Yes, exactly.
They keep coming.
Speaking of hits that made me emotional, the scene with Andarna gets me every time.
Oh my gosh.
Even now knowing that Violet survives, reading that with her telling Andarna to fly home once she knows that Violet is dead, that she's gone, and that there's no hope left, essentially, is so hard to read.
Oh my gosh, it was so freaking sad.
Yeah.
We're told Taryn would die if Violet does, and I get that Andarna may not bond quite as strongly as he does, but if this was some sort of prophecy and Andarna has even said that she was waiting for Violet for all of these years, it's really hard for me to imagine that Andarna would survive if anything were to happen to Violet.
I wouldn't survive. And darn it, wouldn't survive. But I don't think that we have to worry about that. And I don't think that's necessarily wishful thinking, because Rebecca has assured us that Violet gets a happily ever after.
Good.
But I guess, are there some happily ever afters where she gets one in the afterlife? I don't know. I'm not even going there, because I can't go there. I can't go there. Anyways, so on to this battle. Violet spots the Wyvern, and they realize they've lost air superiority that they were counting on. And interesting to note that Taryn didn't know that Wyvern were real, but he says he suspected that they were, which means he has no experience in fighting them, which we knew because the Venin are only just now infiltrating.
Even though it's a horrible situation, it does make me a little happier that there was information that Violet knew and was correct about when the others just didn't know, because she's learned so much. What she has been taught was a lie. So it's nice that something that she knew was a truth.
Yeah, I agree, because it balanced out the heaviness of her not knowing anything else. I mean, and she still didn't even know that that was true, but she at least had some more context than other people, which can be somewhat frustrating for the reader, right? If it's not balanced out with some sort of it was already kind of a lot at the end of this book, right?
Right.
But we got clues that she wasn't picking up on, so we were more prepared. Yeah.
And then reading it back after having context helped a little bit.
And that's what this whole season's been about, because it changes so much, right? We're like, girl, you think this was a lot? And in your first read, you're like, oh my God, she doesn't know a lot. Holy shit, she didn't know anything.
Right.
Which explains her whole identity crisis.
Yeah.
Right? So the battle starts, and how did you pronounce her name? Because I've never known how to pronounce it.
That's how the audiobook says it.
No, I love it. I kept thinking Salil, and I was like, that's not. Anyways, Soleil, unfortunately, doesn't make it very long before she and her dragon, Fuel, all right, we're going with that, are killed by the Venin, who is pulling magic from the earth, which is such an awful visual, like, in my mind. It's an awful image to see them shrivel up.
I hate it.
Well, it really sets the scene here. Like, one, they had just realized that they no longer had air superiority But now they also can't touch the ground without risk of a venom draining them of their magic. That means they can't even get close to any venom on the ground. So, which brings me to my next point, that this venom not only drained this area of the earth itself of its magic, but also drained Soleil and her dragon. I can't even imagine how much power draining a dragon alone would give a venom.
Draining a dragon rider is one thing, but taking on the full power of a dragon has got to be a rare thing for a venom to have the chance to do at all. And that is a scary amount of power for them to harness.
Right. And connecting this to the Onyx Storm excerpt that we just got, Violet explains that there were no survivors in the infirmary because the venom were feeding off of them. This is what she must have meant, where the venom were draining the injured riders who couldn't defend themselves of their magic to fuel their own, allowing them to survive under the wards. Something one of our listeners pointed out, the wards were supposed to be back up at the end of Iron Flame, but in the excerpt, the venom seemed like they were wielding just fine. So are they still up?
It's a very good point. But we don't know when the excerpt takes place. We did try to kind of guess because of the weather, who was around and like with other context clues, but it could be that so much has happened since the end of Iron Flame and the wards may have failed again, possibly.
Yeah, that's true. But I saw a social media clip of Fantasy Fangirls saying that Xaden's part, like his entrance, felt like his first introduction on the page in Onyx Storm. And I think that that was the perfect way to explain the vibe that I was getting about like that they seem distant.
Yeah.
And the way she was saying about it, she was also in the excerpt giving us a lot of like reminding us how her shields, explanation, like a refresh of sorts in the narration. So I do think it's early on.
Yeah.
It just that words thing, like it could just be they're super weak.
Yeah.
Back to this set of chapters. I really enjoyed seeing Violet, and enjoy every time it happens, Violet and Terran's bond dynamic play out in battle scenes where she doesn't even have to finish her thought and he is already on top of whatever plan she has in mind. I cannot wait because I think that that will only get better the more that she trains and the longer that they're bonded, which brings me to my other thought. On my first read, I was slightly underwhelmed, quite a bit anxious, which I think I stand by that part, the anxious part, not underwhelmed at all, but and a tad bit frustrated with how little Violet was actually able to do in the battle because she couldn't aim.
Right.
Now, this was likely because in other books that I've read, they've had a much faster training progression with their magical abilities. So I just wasn't expecting it to be such a slow burn, if you will, for her abilities. But Rebecca is doing something there. She's pointing out that, yes, this is a magical world, but these characters are literally early 20s. Violet hasn't even graduated her first year, and they're facing enemies so powerful and dangerous that an entire country created centuries worth of lies to hide from them behind the safety of their wards. And a handful of students are facing at least 5 of them. And Violet only just found out that they were real like 30 seconds ago. And none of them have slept for over 24 hours.
I like how you and I have to always harp on the sleep because neither one of us can function without sleep.
No, I can't. I didn't like catch that on my first read. And I feel like that's why I keep mentioning it. I'm like, guys, this is really like perspective shifting. Anyways.
Oh, yeah. I also like that she is gradually getting stronger and better rather than it being instantaneous. She's been training for less than a year and also definitely not training for this outside of Terran's flight maneuvers. It would have definitely been more helpful if she was better at aiming, but possibly less satisfying if she was just suddenly super great at it, I think.
Well, and if we actually think it's less than a year, because Threshing's in October, But doesn't she near her 6-month mark from October to where she doesn't realize that she has manifested her signet? So what is that? October. That's like 4 months.
Yeah, she has not been doing this long.
No. And she didn't train to be a writer to begin with. So yeah, she might have had 10 months of hand-to-hand training, which, by the way, didn't really mean anything until Xaden started training her.
Right.
Which is much less than 10 months. So yeah, I get it now. It makes a lot of sense. And for specifically a 5-book series, it makes a lot of sense. But I didn't know that it was going to be 5 books when I first started it. So I do think that that's important to keep in mind. If you're trying to convince someone to read Fourth Wing for the first time, you got to give it some time. There's a lot of this world to explain, to experience. And because it's 5 books, we do have to throw in some relationship miscommunication issues because
you got to have a story.
5 books worth of a story, right? So
I'm also wondering if part of her not great aim is that her signet is actually pure power. Since it's just manifesting as lightning right now, maybe it's too powerful to be contained, extremely accurate in lightning strikes. I'm very interested to learn more about how her signet is actually pure power and not just lightning, hopefully in Onyx Storm.
Right. Well, I think because it was set up so much to emphasize that in Iron Flame, we will get it in Onyx Storm, but it's a good point. And I just want to make sure, in case our verbiage on Violet's true signet is getting lost in translation, to refresh on this. My understanding is that Violet is the one subconsciously choosing lightning as the way to use her power. She is just limiting herself right now because she only thinks of lightning, but she will be able to do lightning and more the more she learns about it as it's set up right now.
Oh, do you think? Yes, Karen.
Yes.
I'm
very intrigued.
Do you think that that is something many writers are doing, not realizing what their full power and signet could be and are limiting themselves?
There's 2 parts to that. One, we know signets evolve. We know they for the most part, Rebecca has made sure to say every signet and the way it functions is different. They don't go by the same rules. So I think that that's her giving herself an out to not have this sort of switch up. We've talked about how Rhiannon, who can bring things to her, can she bring herself somewhere later? Does that get into transporting, distance wielding territory? Because we can clearly see that there's a difference in even Xaden's. He thinks his signet is intentions, but then he learns that he will learn based on what Rebecca has told us that he can actually fully read thoughts. He just doesn't know what to call it. So there's definitely a level of that going on.
Right.
And we could definitely see other signets kind of not just evolve. I think that's one thing, but transform into something they understand better, which is maybe a different signet than they originally thought. Or with Violet being pure power, it really depends on the limitations that Rebecca sets with that. Because if you are a pure power signet, is it energy related specific pure power? Or could Violet actually be like a mirror of other powers and shift it? Can she start teleporting? Can she start? I don't think that that's the direction it's going to go because that makes her very overpowered. And I know that Rebecca's mentioned not wanting an overpowered heroine, but if you're pure power and it's just, it's kind of up in the air right now. Like there's another book that I've read where the power is lightning, but also electricity. Is it kind of like energy fields? I've told you about my theory that Violet can sense energy shifts in a room or sense magic. She's a big sensitivity to that, which we'll come back to in our foreshadowing and theory section. Rebecca has a lot of room
she has
to
options.
be creative here. Yes. And I'm really intrigued to see which direction she goes with it. Because right now we've got enough that could lead to any of them. We only know so much right now. But to your point earlier about why Violet can't aim, Felix says to her in Iron Flame, quote, "Your lack of aim, of control, it's not your fault. It's Cars," as in Professor Cars. Then he says, quote, "You wield pure power that takes the form of lightning because that's what you're most comfortable shaping it as." End quote. So you're partially right there. It's too much for Violet to control because she hasn't learned how yet. She doesn't even know what it is to learn how yet.
Right.
But eventually she will be able to.
I can't wait to see how powerful she becomes when she learns this.
Yes, exactly. Now let's talk about my favorite scene this week. I know you guys were waiting for me to say it. Here it is. It's when Violet gets distracted by Xaden being in danger and almost gets Taryn hurt before Sigale rips half of a wyvern to shreds midair and slams the other half with her dagger tail. Specifically, the way Sigale is described as affectionately gliding her wing under Taryn while simultaneously glaring at Violet is sweet. It's hilarious, and it's also very understandable because, as Violet says, her message is clear. It is Sigale's job to keep Xaden safe, and it is Violet's job to watch out for Taryn. I love that we get to see how, and hopefully we'll get to more, how the very complicated dynamic between the four of them and their complex bond thing they've got going on plays out in battle. It's really cool.
It's so cool. I want more of it always. And Sigale's like, "Girly, I will protect your man. You quit getting distracted and putting my man in danger."
Right.
I like that she communicates with Violet not only through her pointed glares, but also by actually talking to her through the bond, because you're right. It's so cool. And can't wait to see more of it.
You know, it's especially complex with Sigale's feelings and whatever those could be, because we don't get a lot of Sigale.
Yeah.
So I think that's going to change in Onyx Storm. I think we're going to see her be a lot more opinionated, a lot more vocal, or opposite. But how much less vocal can she get than she kind of already is now on page for us? So
if she's not there.
Ooh, no, don't go there, because I can't. There's no way she unbonded. There is a way.
Or if they're just not around.
That's true. Though he's clearly stationed at Biscay. If Violet is actually staying there for school, then we won't get them separated immediately. But you're right.
Good.
Yeah. What is so not cool, though, was literally the rest of this chapter.
Yeah.
Guys, I don't even want to talk about the whole Liam thing. It's too painful. But up until this point in my first read, I kept thinking, as long as Liam doesn't die. So that turned out really well for me.
The rest of this chapter, not fun at all. And no. Rebecca definitely knew how to make us fall in love with and root for Liam throughout the book so far. And in these upcoming scenes, we're seeing how talented and badass he was. And you just think it's impossible for him not to survive.
Yeah, I was pretty convinced, but it makes sense. There was nothing he could do. Let's talk about the first Liam fight scene, because it's important. He has a brave and impressive moment when he and Day are so in sync as Day uses his tail to launch Liam onto the back of a wyvern, again showing exactly what you were just saying, how talented and badass he is.
The best.
Where he then slits the throat of a venom, the one with the staff. That seems important. Oh. The one with the staff would be the Maven.
Yeah.
Whoa, epiphany mid-podcast. That's so fun. Okay. Which, of course, him slitting the throat of this venom kills the wyvern as well. And this right here, Liam doing this and the wyvern that he is standing on falling as he had just killed the venom is how Liam figured out that they need to target the venom to take all of the wyvern out. I'd come across some comments of people being confused about how Liam knew, thinking maybe Liam was more in the know than he let on before this fight. But no, he found out mid-fight right here.
Right.
Now, after witnessing this, Violet has a bittersweet moment of hope, thinking they might just be able to survive. I'm telling you right now, if Violet's internal monologue says that in Onyx Storm, we might be able to survive. close the book if you do not want your heart broken, because that means that one of our favorite characters, one of the main, right, is done for.
One can only hope that none of our favorites are on the chopping block.
Unfortunately, Rebecca has made it crystal clear that all of our favorites are on the chopping block. She has specifically said that we will not see a battle where someone doesn't die. So I'm just throwing that really not fun nugget of information out.
This is
so
my
I'm sorry.
exit.
I'm sorry. She also has made it clear she enjoys making us cry. Like, she says not to trust her. It's just like, which characters do we think will and won't survive? Like, the only one that is safe is Jasenia.
Yep.
To live. Maybe Jasenia turns into a Venom. But then that would kind of like make it way complicated that she's writing this whole story. So I don't think so. But she's the only one we know that makes it. All right. Here we are. This is it. The scene that I have been dreading discussing all season. Our Liam bravely defending Violet at the expense of his own and Day's life. I struggled so much while just writing this outline because I got too emotional. And it doesn't let up. Like, I have sobbed every time I've read it, even on the third read, right? Like, the specific parts. I genuinely cannot handle it when the dragons cry out. Even Amber, fucking Mavis, her dragon crying out. Oh, I can't. So Day alone in this scene was so heartbreaking to read. But then Liam reaching out to touch Day one last time. His raw scream after Day crashes into the hillside. And then Taryn and Andarna both crying out. And then Zayden's reaction.
Oh.
I tried to keep this section like as detailless as possible, as vague as possible, because it's not going to be fun for you guys to listen to just sob. So, anyways, I will say I am so glad that Liam's last moments were with Zayden and Day. And as much as this scene is gut-wrenching and horrible and everything I could have went forever without experiencing, it is also so incredibly well written, and it is only so emotionally charged because we fell so in love with Liam. I have never cried so badly over a book until, well, that first read, awful. But then I listened to the graphic audio version and hysterically sobbed. Like, Matthew, my partner, thought something was wrong. It was bad. And I've been thinking about it through this read even more, that there's a sentiment, and it's kind of cheesy, but it really puts into words like how I feel about it. The quote, "It is better to have loved and lost than to have never loved at all."
I usually agree with the sentiment until it's about Liam.
Oh.
Honestly, I don't think I had cried this hard over a book since I read Bridge to Terabithia in the 5th grade. And I can't even imagine the graphic audio of this scene. And I don't know that I could handle it.
So, no, there's like, they also have like battle sounds and screams in the background. It's awful. It's awful.
And I agree that it was really well written because it wouldn't have made us feel this way or this much if it wasn't.
No. Well, and I've said before, I'm an empathetic reader. Like, I do feel it a little more intensely, I think, than, like, you know, some people don't understand when you get emotional over fictional characters. But we have spent so long, especially in this deep dive, with these characters. But even in the first book, you fall in love with him. And that was so intentional. right? We were supposed to have our hearts ripped out by this scene and this character. Rebecca has said in her Entertainment Weekly interview, which we'll link down in the show notes, that she knew Liam was going to die the moment she wrote him.
Rude.
So that was very fucking rude. That was the point. And like, for a book to evoke that much emotion, like, I don't think it's a negative thing. I think it means that it was, whether people think it's well written grammatically or whatever, like, if it made me feel like that, which is deeper than like my average, back to my whole point about being an empathetic reader, that is incredible to me. That pieces of paper, that someone's story that they came up with made me that attached and then emotional. As much as I do hate experiencing that, and which is why I will never read non-happily ever after, because I cannot handle it mentally, I do love knowing that I could feel one that deeply, even if it's not real. And that I got to know a character as fantastic, phenomenal, all good things, Liam. And as heartbreaking as losing Liam is at all, and would have been at any point in this series, his story ending here is particularly heartbreaking. He has lost both of his parents to this cause, to the very same thing that he is doing today, which is just trying to help innocent people. He's only like 20 years old. It is his first year. So he's like 20. He hasn't gotten to see his sister since his parents were executed. As they were separated, that's like 5 or 6 years. And the most heartbreaking part about it, I did not realize this. I had to look up the exact timeline. Even after reading it in Iron Flame, I didn't realize he and Sloane, his sister, were about to be reunited when she joined the Quadrant. Like within weeks. Conscription Day is mid-July. This happened July 2nd.
Oof.
He was just weeks away from being reunited with his sister. To be able to help her across the parapet himself, protect her himself, and deliver his letters himself.
It also makes Sloane's story so much sadder and feels sympathy for her, even though she is extremely unlikable at first.
Extremely unlikable. Yeah, it really does. And can you imagine from her perspective, she knows she's like 2 weeks out. And then she finds out, like, I can't imagine like a week before she's supposed to go join the Quadrant, where she's thinking her brother, one, she's going to get to see him again. And two, he's going to be able to protect her.
I would be extremely unlikable too.
Yeah, well, and I would hate Violet too without the full context. This, I don't even know how to like wrap up talking about this scene, because it is just so, you know, I think our reactions to the summary really spoke volumes, and we're going to move on. So Xaden relays Liam's message to Violet. She needs to target the venom to kill the wyvern while Xaden holds the wyvern back with his shadows. Fucking badass. He throws the shadow shield up, and Violet has a moment of realization, quote, "He'll be the first to die if I'm not exactly what he called me under that tree all those months ago. Violence." Oh, I just got chills. What a powerful thought and shift in perspective for Violet.
Absolutely. A name that she didn't even like at first.
Right?
Yeah, and then it became an endearing pet name. And then it became fuel to save him and everyone else.
Right, which mirrors the evolution of her perspective on being a weapon in general, too. Like, she just has to own it.
With the difference being, she's not being used by anyone, and she gets to decide to be violent.
Right, she gets to decide. That's, oh, yes, it's so powerful. So with that, she takes all of her rage and desire for revenge for her friend, and in the name of protecting the rest of them, into the air, completely in sync with Taryn, striking a wyvern down with a bolt of lightning on her very first try. Her signet is so connected to her emotions. Before she feels Terran's roar of pain from the same venom that killed Soleil, stabbing him with her sword between the scales, which I was so scared. I was so scared, especially because that's the cliffhanger between the chapters. Anyways, so this venom is holding green-tipped daggers, which we now know to be poison, and is so fast that Violet says it's like she knows Violet's next move before she makes it, adapting to her fighting style.
This paints such a vivid picture in my mind and also really stressed me out.
Right.
I was imagining being Violet in this moment and trying to fight for not just your life, but the lives of your friends and countless innocent people.
Right.
And the creature is one step ahead of you almost.
Right. And she has no idea at this point. One, she just found out that they were real. She has no idea the extent of what they're capable of.
No.
She's learning that they can do this in the moment as they're doing it, which is absolutely terrifying.
Scary, terrifying, frustrating, all of it.
It does not stop. This whole stretch of chapters just bam, bam, bam. We do have to talk about what the venom says after she stabs Violet. Quote, "Such untapped power. No wonder we were called here. You could command the sky to surrender all its power, and I bet you don't know what to do with it, do you? Riders never do. I'm going to split you open and see where all that astonishing lightning comes from, or maybe I'll let him do it. You'll wish for death if I hand you over to my sage." Quite a few things to unpack in here, okay? I first want to note that the "no wonder we were called here" is super suspicious because it's almost like the venom is saying that they sensed Violet's power and that that's what lured them to Resin. But we now know that Atos left an actual lure, the iron box thing, as it's referenced in Iron Flame. So that's confusing, right? Because I don't understand what else that wording could mean. There's also the fact that, like...
I don't like that.
Right. There's also the part about you could command the whole sky to surrender its power. I bet you don't even know what to do with it. Then I'm like, oh, they kind of maybe know she's not just a lightning wielder. Like she's different. But the writers never do is like, oh, that's not specific to Violet. Right?
Right.
And then the split you open and see where all that astonishing lightning comes from. That seems like more than just I'm going to stab you and you're going to die.
Yeah.
That seems like there's something special about you and I'm going to find out what it is. So it is just a suspicious paragraph. Right.
Yeah.
But I also want to talk about the sage that this venom references. It's important to remember because the references of sage throughout both books is getting confusing because Violet for a long time doesn't know what the differences are between a maven and a sage. So there are several sage, plural, in the series so far. It is interesting that the next time a venom threatens to take her to their sage, in chapter 42 of Iron Flame, they say the exact same thing about how she will wish for death. So that seems quite important. Why does it mirror exactly? It's like one thing to be like, oh, like he's cruel, but like word for word. And Violet even says, heard that before from the last one I killed or something like that. He also says to her, it's you, the one who commands the sky, which is very similar to the same thing that this venom just said. And in the Iron Flame venom altercation, that venom implies that there are multiple sage by asking which sage that Violet's referencing. So there are multiple sage and way too many parallels here. But let's talk about their ranking system because we got that information. It's a little bit, but it's enough from Iron Flame's chapter 47 epigraph that sages, sage, I think is a plural in itself, are distinguished from initiates and asims, and that their eyes are permanently red and their veins perpetually distend toward their temples. Okay, that is the descriptor that we're given. And then we're told that they don't know much in the same epigraph about Maven because they've never studied one before. Okay? Yeah. So there's no like written out distinction. But if we think back to the Onyx Storm excerpt, the silver-haired Venin is at least a sage because she has the distended, veins, but could also be a maven, the highest ranking. Again, because we don't have a lot of information about that. Trying to tease out the connection between which sage is which and are they a sage, specific to this scene, based on callbacks to Resin and Violet's thoughts in Iron Flame. The sage this initiate is referring to is the same sage that escapes Resin, that Garrick tells Xaden escapes, that haunts both Xaden and Violet's nightmares in Iron Flame, that tries to attack in chapter 56 of Iron Flame as Violet is about to raise the wards in time, so he retreats. This is in Orisha. The same one that gets Xaden to turn Venin, and the same one that Xaden kills. That Venin is here, and it's the same sage. But when Xaden calls him a sage at the end of Iron Flame, that Venin corrects him and tells him he's a general. Like scoffs at him. He is a general, which according to that same epigraph before about the ranking system, that makes him a maven. Now, because this initiate here in Fourth Wing calls him a sage specifically, that makes me think that he was a sage at this point, and he was promoted between this point and the end of Iron Flame. It is the only thing that works for continuity. Again, this is super confusing because it's like this word sage is thrown out so much. But that lends the question of what this Venin did in between that time to become the highest rank, to get like promoted essentially. Like maybe he did something huge that then like conveniently between this time got him promoted, or he replaced a maven that was killed. Now, these were my initial thoughts about who the maven is, but we're going to circle back to that staff thing after we have this first conversation. I think I'm still leaning this way, but the staff is sus. In this fight scene, Tarn does specifically say, a general can recognize another general, and that's their leader. Again, implies a maven. There are two Venin left in front of Tarn and Violet in this scene, and Violet is asking Tarn to determine the more powerful one for her to target. He picks the one with red veins across his temples, so that checks out with that epigraph, and down his cheeks.
Oh.
Which seems to be a distinctive difference, possibly between a sage and a maven. And that's the one that Violet kills.
That was so much.
It is. Well, and here's where it's complicated because now the staff comment makes me feel like that was the maven because only one of them had a staff, according to Liam. So maybe that's not the case. Maybe I don't know. Maybe it was just Venin longer. But regardless, I do think it is a situation where the maven was killed in Resin at this battle. And then that's why the other sage was promoted to maven.
Yeah, I think that definitely makes sense that the sage would have been promoted because of the death of the previous general / maven. And the Venin hierarchy is extremely intriguing because at first you just sort of think that they become a Venin, but then you find out that they are somehow organizing so much that they have like a structured hierarchy.
Yeah, they are so much more organized than I expected. And it makes me wonder how they even find the initiates who turn without knowing. Like, can you even turn without knowing? Like, is that possible?
I wouldn't think you could turn without knowing, but honestly, I wouldn't put it past Rebecca.
Right. The only way I could see that being possible is if you felt the hum of the power in the earth at like a desperate moment.
Mm.
But becoming venom is in exchange for your soul. And if people didn't know that they were exchanging their soul to then pull that power from the earth, that hum that they're feeling, that doesn't really equate to what makes venom evil. That's not a consensual exchange. It's not an informed exchange, which is, the evil of being venom is that you're power hungry, essentially, except for in cases like Xaden, where he's actively choosing it. He knows that it's wrong, but he's doing it out of love. But it's being so power hungry that you don't care about the consequences.
And I could see it being more accidental, but still evil if they were just super desperate to get power and maybe not knowing exactly what it was, but you still have that intention behind it. I guess. I'm not sure.
Yeah, but can they really then be villains, essentially, is what I'm getting at, because they're not informed that necessarily what they're doing is wrong. But maybe you subconsciously do know. I don't know. It makes more sense. You have to know about it. And maybe that's kind of why part of Navarre's reasoning, at the very least, or they'll use it as reasoning, is why they haven't told people that venom exists, because then that could create more venom who know that it's an option.
That is very true.
Not defending Navarre here. But that might be something that comes up.
Right.
There's so much to unpack with the venom, right? I say this is the strangest thing, but maybe it's not the strangest thing that we've been talking about. A strange thing here is that the second venom is killed shortly after by Xaden. And there are continuity issues with that, because we're told that there were 5 venom from the start when Liam said that he saw 4, and then shortly after added, and one guy with the giant-ass staff, which is funny in retrospect. Here, Taryn says 3 of the venom are dead right before they see these 2. And then these 2 die, making that 5 venom that are dead. That would be all of them that we know about. But then Garrick told them in Iron Flame that 1 venom got away, which Violet says later in her dreams that he is the teacher of the Dark Wielder that she killed here in Ressen. That's actually 6 venom total.
Right. Rebecca could have made a mistake because she wrote this book in such a short amount of time.
Yeah, well, and also maybe a venom showed up.
Right, I was going to say, maybe we just weren't told about.
It's just weird, because why not just put that there were those 6? I don't know. It was just interesting, because it also switched between them referencing it as 4 at one point. I'm gonna chalk it up to they just showed up. But let's talk about how Violet is able to kill this leader venom, taking on all of Taryn's power to the point near burnout, and letting Andarna share her gift of time manipulation to slow down so she can pinpoint her aim, directly striking the venom with her lightning, thinking, I am focused on vengeance with a coldness that would make even my mother proud. Oh.
Violet is such a badass.
Such a badass.
Obviously, with the help of her dragons.
Right.
But it's not only the power she's wielded that makes her a badass, it's that she was willing to risk it all to avenge Liam's death. It's super interesting to me, though, that she specifically says a vengeance. And I feel like this is a bit of an insight into Lilith's mindset after Brennan was killed, or so she thought.
Oh, I like that. That just made me realize that this whole domino effect of Lilith capturing and executing Xaden's dad was because she thought that he killed Brennan. But he didn't.
Nope.
So I wonder if things would have gone differently had she known that Brennan didn't actually die here.
Or at least, I don't think that she would have been the one to
capture and kill him.
Capture or kill Ben Ryerson.
Yeah, because it's probably a matter of like, the rebellion didn't really have a chance back then. But that really did set the whole stage for all of this. Yeah.
He would have died either way, but would she have been the one to?
Well, and none of the rest would have really played out this way, because if she wasn't the one that killed him, then Xaden wouldn't have been enemies to lovers. Which actually makes a ton of sense, because if we think about character building, right? Like, she had to have a reason for them to be enemies to lovers that was like somewhat forgivable. We could see the evolution that would all piece together. So it makes a lot of sense, but it is cool and fascinating to think about. Anyways. So Violet falls off of Taryn as she has been stabbed with a poison-tipped blade and just burnt out, essentially, on Taryn's power. And Andarna catches her, barely able to slow her fall, and using all of her feather tail magic, which she was already fatigued from trying to help Liam, now to save Violet. And this is what sends Andarna into the dreamless sleep, which, honestly, Andarna's sacrifice here makes me, I say made, but it makes me tear up.
Absolutely.
Which goes back to Andarna always kind of being in the right place when she's been told not to be.
Always at the right place at the right time, and just in the nick of time.
Wouldn't it be so interesting if, like, Andarna had some sort of premonition ability? Anyways.
I mean, that's an interesting thought that we've never, ever thought about before.
I feel like we've said that the last 3 or 4 times we've mentioned this theory. Guys, we're convinced.
Sense.
It does. So Violet is in and out of consciousness, and Xaden insists that she won't survive a trip to Biscayeth because this is bad. Her freaking blood is turning black. That they have to take her to him, which we now know is Brennan, her mender of a dead brother. Dead
him.
brother. Him.
It was so ominous, and now we know that's because of who the him was. And most of the others were so unsure about taking her to Brennan. At first, I wondered if they were just unsure about taking her to Brennan specifically. But then I realized that they may not even know who Brennan is to her, and that they might actually be unsure about taking her to Arisha and seeing everything that they have been working to hide.
I've always thought it was the latter, and not knowing how Violet would respond. And I still kind of lean to that because I didn't really consider that maybe Xaden was the only one who knew that Brennan was Violet's sister, because, you know, we find out that Brennan changed his last name. So like they might not have connected that, even though they do know him. But then again, Liam knew because he almost let it slip at the reunification celebration.
Right. I think that only a select few people like Xaden and Liam knew, but I think a lot of the others most likely did not.
He's not going to let that information out all willy-nilly because he doesn't, it's not about knowing the connection to Violet. It's about knowing how valuable he would be as ransom as the general's son.
I mean, the Griffin flyers say that Violet would make a great ransom.
Yeah. Well, and also that's not a great legacy, right? From his perspective, from the revolution, she is a villain. And he very much so believes that. So he doesn't have much patience for her or empathy for her in Iron Flame, which I get it, because technically when I think he's all but says it if he doesn't say it directly, but after he survives and finds out all the bad that Navarre is doing, he knows that she essentially sacrificed him fighting for the wrong side, the wrong cause. Oh,
right.
Okay, so this is next topic, but I do logistically wonder how they were able to fly Violet over to Arisha from Ressen. It's not a super far flight if you look at the book map, but she can't just sit up in her saddle unconscious like this. And I choose to go with the Xaden POV fanfic by Belle Beebe, which we'll link in the show notes, that Taryn let Xaden ride on his back holding Violet during the flight. Because 1, that logistically makes the most sense. And 2, it's so powerful to think about when no dragon, especially Taryn, allows other riders to touch them, much less ride them.
The great logistical question.
Yeah.
I do think that makes the most sense, though. But if that is the case, it shows how much Taryn cares for Violet and wants her to be okay, that he would be willing to allow Xaden to ride on him for Violet, especially since he basically told Xaden that he would cook him alive if he fails to get Violet healed.
Yeah, well, and I mean, Taryn was pissed.
Oh, yeah.
And rightfully so. And his priority was her surviving. And also, Taryn can fly the fastest out of all of those dragons. Even Scale, like Scale tails him. So I think he absolutely would let Xaden ride holding her if it meant
saving her.
Yeah, if her life is on the line, which it is.
Like all of them.
Well, for saving all of them, right? But you're right. No, you're right, because the bond.
No. Yeah, the bond.
Yeah. So, and it is interesting because, like you said, he told Xaden he was going to cook him alive. But like, one, Xaden had enough motivation for his own life and he loves her. So Taryn was just like tripling it down. You know?
Said, before you have the chance to die, I'm going to make it painful.
Yeah. God, I love Taryn. Now, before we discuss the last chapter of Fourth Wing, I have pulled some insights from our Rebecca Yarros archives to share. In her Entertainment Weekly interview, Rebecca said that the last chapter of Fourth Wing was supposed to be Violet's point of view when she originally wrote it. She said that she had fully written it out over 2,000 words worth of an info dump of Violet waking up and wanting all of the info right then, and Rebecca then giving it to her. Well, I'm sure with some limitations. So Rebecca said that she had the idea of giving the last chapter to us in Xaden's POV so that we could see that he does love Violet, even though he hasn't said it, and that he isn't this giant, awful asshole that we could perceive without further context. She also said that switching this last chapter to Xaden's point of view led to her deciding to end Iron Flame the same way.
I love it. If Rebecca was going to give us a bunch of answers from Violet's point of view in the last chapter, I feel like that would have just changed the story so much because she gave us insights that Violet wouldn't be able to know, and it gives us a fuller picture. And I love that she did this for both books.
Yeah, well, and I'm very curious because, like, we really don't get an info dump at the beginning of Iron Flame either. So, like, she clearly decided to keep more than she would have left or would have given us in Fourth Wing, because I was kind of questioning, like, Violet doesn't like, granted, she's distracted and there's a lot going on, but I guess she asks about Brennan, and maybe that's the answers that she was going to give us at the end of Fourth Wing. But I kind of like that cliffhanger.
And she doesn't know the right questions to ask.
Boy, don't we know that.
So how is she going to get all of this information? So she's asking what she knows about Brennan.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. And I will say, as much as I would love to see that first draft of Violet's point of view, I'm really glad we did switch to Xaden's, specifically as, you know, was Rebecca's goal. We, for the very first time, got to see how deeply Xaden feels for Violet, how much she has misperceived Xaden. Part of his reasoning as well behind all of this, clearly not all of it, but also his guilt and regret, and finally, and most deliciously of all, his desire and resolve to never hurt Violet again. We got all of that in a single last chapter.
It seemed very necessary at this point, before the other Xaden POV chapters and before Iron Flame, because we thought how Violet thought, because that's whose perspective we had.
Yeah.
And I love that it gave us some truths about what Xaden was actually feeling.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, well, you know, that was think about if we hadn't had this last chapter in Xaden's point of view, we might not have had Iron Flames, because she said it was a natural progression to do the same with both. So it's like,
we might not have liked Xaden as much because we didn't know.
And It's hard because
But
I think
you
this
wouldn't
changed
have known. Yeah.
my reread for me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, it set the stage.
Yeah.
I'm so glad she did it. Thank you, Rebecca. Keep them coming. There are two important takeaways, though, that we have to talk about from Zayden and Violet's conversation once Violet wakes up. Not to mention the fact that at first I was hella confused about why she was being so lovey-dovey. But I was also like, yes, please. Like, let's just stay in this bliss moment. But that ends quickly. The 2 points are that Zayden never left her side and that he gives Violet the carving of Andarna that Liam had just finished for her. As if that couldn't get more heartbreaking and emotional. Twisting the knife.
I can't with the Liam stuff. Oh my gosh. And Andarna. And it was Andarna before she changed. Oh.
Baby Andarna.
Baby Andarna. But this was so meaningful to see that Zayden stayed with Violet the entire time.
Right.
Not even leaving her to see Liam, his foster brother, laid to rest.
Yeah, that's so... It really does speak volumes because I wouldn't have blamed him for only leaving for that, but even then he did it, which is heartbreaking. I actually wouldn't go as far to say that Zayden wouldn't do that because there are lots of theories that have circulated that Imogen has wiped Violet's memories, and it was brought up at some interviewer panel, and Rebecca said something along the lines of, that's an interesting thought. Very suspiciously, she said that when asked about whether Imogen had wiped Violet's memories in Fourth Wing. So it's not off the table. Maybe
Imogen could have been the backup plan here and just let Violet live on her merry way.
Well, I would agree with that, except for Brennan then shows up.
Yeah.
So I think that was I'm going to go with the backup plan. Otherwise, we've just seen an Imogen reference later that kind of connected that payoff, essentially.
Yeah.
But yeah, I didn't even catch it until this read, and I was like, oh, that's Brennan. Anyways. So Violet quickly explains that she cannot trust Zayden any longer, understandably, even though he's never technically lied to her. He still kept so much with such ease. And honestly, as much as, for the story, I want her to forgive him and be understanding and skip off into the sunset. I get this because how do you ever trust that he is telling her everything that she needs to know when she thought that he would be doing that the whole time? When she had no idea how much she didn't know before. That doesn't just go away.
She doesn't feel like he ever truly cared about her because of how much was kept from her. And from her point of view, she literally says in her mind, you don't keep secrets from someone you care about, let alone secrets that are going to cost me my life. Yeah.
Does she say that out loud?
No, I just said she said it in her mind.
No, but when does she say that? Because this chapter is Zayden's POV.
I'm going back. She thought it whenever she was out.
Gotcha.
Unconscious still. But now we see both sides because we understand why he had to keep so much from her. Which goes back to why it's so necessary for us to get Zayden's point of view in this chapter.
Right. So, of course, we've touched on it briefly before, but this cliffhanger reveal that Brennan is alive. Not only that, but the hints that Zayden and Brennan more than just know of each other. Zayden's over here talking about how he's got his timing planned out. If I know him, it'll be 20 seconds. What? And the fact that he knew he was a great poison master. But I feel like that's less intimate than timing this man out. Knowing his impatience, I would like to point out that this did not help Zayden out on the whole keeping things from Violet front.
Definitely did not help the secret's point of contention that they're having. My jaw was on the floor in my first read, and I was really excited he wasn't dead, but I could also feel how confused Violet would be to see her brother, who, as far as she knew, had been dead for the past 6-ish years. And the man that she loves knew. All of the betrayal is just...
And she was already upset. She was already upset with him for keeping huge things from her.
All that betrayal.
And he's had a year?
No.
Oh!
It's really all setting up for the conflict that we see all throughout Iron Flame. And we realize what a big part Brennan is going to play in the revolution.
Yeah. I've mentioned it before that I somewhat saw him being alive coming. Like, I just felt like it would work. It would fit really well. I did not think that it would be the cliffhanger, though. So I audibly gasped as well. I also didn't expect at all that he was on the side of, much less a key leader of the revolution. I loved the twist and the questions. There's so many questions that came along with it. Like, how did he survive? How did he go from battling on Navarre's side to the revolution? How did Taryn go from battling on Navarre's side to the revolution? What does General Sorengale know? What is going on?
Right. And did she see what she thought was him being killed? Like, did she see that? Is that why she had such an emotional reaction?
General Sorengale?
Yeah.
Well, I think because he practically does die, right? Because Naolan has to resurrect him, essentially.
That didn't work.
But did she get to see that? Or she just, like, was Naolan beside him when he got shot and she saw it? Like, if I'm thinking about the play-by-play of this battle, right? Like, General Sorengale sees Brennan get shot. He's on the brink of death when Naolan gets to him. So that doesn't have to be instantaneous, right? Like, she could have thought he died right then. And then if this whole speculation on, did Naolan actually resurrect him? Because if he did, then it wasn't just the brink of death. He could have actually been dead and then brought him back General Sorengale could have been gone. She could have seen Xaden's dad kill Brennan, quote unquote, and then go straight after the dad, right? And then there's the theory that Naolan didn't actually resurrect him with his dragon power, that he is a Venin and that Naolan is a wyvern of a sense because of the rune on his hand. That Naolan's still alive and is a Venin, and that he basically, like, magically powers Brennan.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Whoa.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I've seen that theory everywhere. I will try and find, like, where I first saw it. I didn't save that one because I've seen it so much. Usually we'll try and credit. Yeah. Well, I've mentioned it kind of vaguely before, like, if we've talked about the rune.
Right, that.
Or, you know, a rune can also protect something else, but how do you put a rune in your skin? Like, anyways, it's very suspicious. So back to the whole play-by-play of what is going on, like, General Sorengale might not have seen the whole rest of that play out. And then Naolan dies, supposedly. And then Brennan's story is, like, that doesn't all take place right there. Like, I guess he just, like, pretended to be dead or stuff. So Brennan might not even be giving us the full truth about what happened after that anyway. So it honestly was a great way to show us how much we didn't know.
Yeah.
How much there was to unpack in the coming books.
The one truth we know, we don't know anything.
We don't know anything. And I think that's exactly what Rebecca wants. And that is the end of our discussion and analysis section. The last one for this season.
Oh my gosh.
That's crazy.
Now, real quick, time to head on over to the Healers Quadrant.
This one's really easy this week. We both have the same hot and not.
Yep.
So, hot, Liamin and Darna.
Yeah.
No further explanation needed. Now, I will say Rebecca is on my not list this week for chapter 36.
Same. Same.
And the specific wyvern that killed Day.
Oh, absolutely. But that's still Rebecca's fault.
It's still Rebecca's fault. Anyways, moving very quickly past that. Favorite moments. Got a couple for you. 1, Sigale affectionately gliding her wing under Taryn while glaring at Violet after Violet almost let a wyvern take a bite out of Taryn. Love that. Love it, love it, love it. Next, Taryn almost eating Garrick alive for stating that taking Violet to Orisha to save her life would put everything at risk, even though Violet just saved all of their lives.
Oh,
I love how territorial he is, like defensive he is over his rider. It's incredible. And Violet deserves it. Finally, Xaden's confession that he had fallen for Violet.
Absolutely.
Yours?
I think I think my favorite moment was the Brennan reveal because it was so shocking, and I love a plot twist where nobody dies.
Fair. Or turns Venom.
Right.
Okay, favorite quotes. I have so many this week. 4 chapters worth. I think that's not that bad.
Right.
But I'll rattle them off. First, Violet's. Find a good hiding place, Andarna. I can't stand the thought of you being hurt. And then Andarna responding, go for the throat.
I love
so
her.
good. Of course, it's been my honor.
That's on mine too.
Oh my God. Xaden's, there is no me without you, as he kisses Violet's forehead. Oh. Terrans, I will bet my life on you as I have from the first day. Which is so powerful a statement because he did quite literally bet his life on her, bonding her knowing that if she died, he would too. Oh. Xaden, you can't make me fall for you and then die. None of this is worth it without you.
Okay.
Oh, okay. And then finally, it's another one, Xaden one. I would rather lose this whole war than live without you. And if that means I have to prove myself over and over, then I'll do it.
Oof. Like I said, mine was also Liam's. It's been my honor. And then the Terran one you mentioned where he's just is betting on Violet. I just love that. Also, Brennan's welcome to the revolution, Violet.
Yes, that's such a good one. Wait,
Chills.
What a fantastic end of the book. Like that last line.
Yeah, there was a lot of, even though it was a rough set of chapters, there was a lot of good quotes.
Good moments, good quotes. Yeah. Oh, well, especially Xaden's, like, they're so lovey. I love them. Now, let's stop by the Scribe Quadrant for a quick epigraph analysis. First, starting with chapter 36. For there in the land beyond the shadows were monsters that dwelled in the night and dined on the souls of children who wandered too close to the woods. The wyvern's cry, the fables of the Baron.
This is an interesting epigraph because it does not seem to directly correlate with anything in this chapter except that what Violet does know about the Venom and wyvern has come from the fables and folklore literature that she has. Clearly, this is the one that she has read.
Right.
They were always seen as monsters, but turned from something that was true, like that was a true threat, to the equivalent of like the boogeyman that is meant to scare children.
Right. Well, I think it's also a play on how stories get passed down in folklore, right? Like that's what it's supposed to be. And there are morals to them, but also it's called the wyvern's cry. So I'm wondering if wyvern actually do eat children at the border. You know, like there's like clearly some levels of truth to fables.
All right,
you know, they're eating Sawyer's leg. So it's like, I know it's a battle, but like it wouldn't put it past them to actually be eating children.
I don't like that. Chapter 37. But it was the third brother who commanded the sky to surrender its greatest power, who finally vanquished his jealous sibling at a great and terrible price. The origin, the fables of the Baron.
Yes. So there is a lot of speculation on this epigraph. It is mostly thought of as what happened back at unification and was the way that the Venom were first defeated, hence the story's name is The Origin. Some speculate that this could be a prophecy of sorts or a situation of history repeating itself, thinking that the third brother is foreshadowing Violet, who is referred to consistently as commanding the sky, right? And possibly her killing a sibling who has turned Venom. But that doesn't necessarily hold up all the way, as one of the siblings is a griffin rider in this fable of, I guess it is a fable. So I suspect this does have a bigger meaning and role in the book, of course, and will come up, if not in Onyx Storm, then definitely in future books, one way or the other. Wow. Do you have one way you lean?
Oh, I don't want to believe it, but I feel like it might be a sibling thing. And I do not think Mira's the sibling that would be Venom. I will just say that.
Well, I wonder if... Oh, this is like a wild theory, but I wonder if technically you can be bonded to a griffin and a dragon. So what if Mira, who is known to slay griffins, goes and bonds a griffin as well, and then Brennan is the one who turns Venom, or is already Venom,
right?
Or is a freaking wyvern of a Venom, and then
I had the thought whenever I was saying Mira, I don't think that she would be the one that gets killed. I could see Mira also bonding a griffin, especially
that would be so ironic, considering that she is like known to be. She hates them, but also she is known as. If you think about the Star of Navarre that she got, that honor, she got it in a battle against griffins. Like, she is known for murdering a lot of Serena's friends, which is its own enemies to lovers that I really hope for.
That's what I was going to say, that theory as well.
Well, especially if they team up. It would be really interesting if a dragon would even agree to let their... Like, how would that story come about if Mira was... to go bond a griffin as well? Like, why would that be the case?
That's true.
But if you're bonded to a griffin and a dragon, and your dragon dies,
do you die?
Do you still live? Oh, that's intriguing. That's messy. I like it.
Moving on, chapter 38. In the event that you come across a poison you do not recognize, it is best to treat with any and every antidote. Either way, the patient will die. But at least this way, you would have learned something. Major Frederick's Modern Guide for Healers.
So this one is funny, clearly. Yeah. But it's basically saying that in this time period, there's no real solution to poison. You just die.
Die.
Yeah, which scared me on my first read, because you read this before you know that Violet survives, right?
Yeah.
And it lessens your confidence in thinking that she will. Even though I'm like, there's a book too. Do we switch character? Like, whatever. But Brennan isn't a healer. He is a mender. So that is how Violet did survive.
And lastly, chapter 39. You are all cowards. The last words of Fen Ryerson, redacted.
Redacted. And I don't think it says any, like, we always put everything on here. It doesn't even say, like, where this information's from. That's so intriguing. I'm questioning it to the point where I'm like, did we accidentally leave it out? But I don't think so. It's really intriguing.
This is Xaden's POV. Maybe that's the last thing he heard his dad say before he died. And so it's not actually written down.
I don't know why. For whatever reason, I thought it was in the interrogation, because that's the last epigraph we got of Fen. But you're right. This would have been at their execution. Oh, that's intriguing. Oh, that's also so sad, because Xaden heard that.
Yeah.
Oh, what a way to instill such strong morals, though. I stand by this man not being morally gray. Anyways, the fact that it's redacted speaks volumes, right? Like, Navarre is hiding that.
Right.
So nobody questions what it is that he's calling them cowards for, right? But what a powerful last epigraph. All those lies and outlandish conspiracies that Fen was supposedly spewing, and they redacted him, calling them cowards. That might be my favorite epigraph.
Short and sweet and to the point.
And finally, time to join our riot as we take flight into our foreshadowing, overarching questions, and theories section, including moments that stood out during this reread and spiral into theories. First, Violet sensed something was wrong when they first landed at the lake. Back in the last set of chapters, commenting on the dragons sensing it too, which Taryn confirms in these chapters. There are several instances where Violet has heightened intuition that are very suspicious and have prompted a lot of speculation about it being a possible second signet. But because it's happening here in Fourth Wing as well, and not just in Iron Flame, that means it cannot be related to her second signet, as she wouldn't get that until after Indarna's dreamless sleep in Iron Flame. However, that doesn't mean that it isn't significant. It could be related to her first signet. We have talked in depth about her signet being raw power, raw energy. Maybe she is able to sense energy shifts in the air, being able to sense magic, like the Venom mentioned being called here by Violet's level of power, which is in line with how she seems to be especially sensitive to Venom as they are channeling raw power directly, just like dragons do. Which actually made me think of the Onyx Storm back jacket excerpt and how Xaden was telling Violet she needed to learn to find him. I'm wondering if she can use her energy signet to sense where someone is, maybe like through energy waves in the air, or specifically Venom by being able to sense their power. That would make that part of the excerpt make so much more sense.
I am fully convinced, I think, by this, because you're right. It would make so much sense for her to have this ability since she is pure raw power, and that Xaden is trying to help Violet, like he always is, learn how to use her abilities to protect herself and others.
There's so many solid theories about what her second signet could be, and they all have such great reasoning. And I think I'm starting to be like, I think a lot of them are just connected to her first signet. I think that her signet allows her to amplify as well as sense other magic and energy shifts in the air.
Right.
Like, I think that is her first signet. But that's
sense.
what she doesn't quite understand yet and will grow to understand and be able to utilize. That's fucking cool.
So cool.
That is. Next, Liam seeing the Venom appear as though they teleported like the Venom do in the Onyx Storm excerpt, which is apparently also considered distance wielding. At first, I just thought that distance wielding is like being super fast, essentially being able to wield distance without blipping, basically. But I looked it up and it seems to essentially be another word for teleporting.
Yeah.
This is what Xaden must be doing when he vanishes from behind Violet in the back jacket excerpt, which makes sense because he's a Venom.
Ooh.
But, we speculated in our excerpt coverage bonus episode that they seem to be doing it in front of people,
right?
Teaching them how to fight Venom. But clearly, if he's teleporting, they know that he's a Venom.
Yeah.
So, interesting.
Ooh.
Next, before the battle starts, Taryn says, quote, "There's something in that trading post. We all feel it." Now, it could have been this crate marked with Liam's family crest or the iron box that Crod sensed in the clock tower. I always thought that they were the same thing until this read, when I realized that they're in different buildings. As the one with the chest with Liam's family crest is referred to as being in a building on the other side of the road, with the iron box being in the clock tower. Now, we know now that the iron box is the lure that Colonel Atos placed to draw the Venom to that location to set the marked ones up to be killed, right? This whole lure reminder, which was pointed out by one of our listeners, Karen Soto, thank you, darling, makes me question if Colonel Atos would have had enough time to place the lure if Dane had stolen Violet's memory on Paige at the reunification celebration. Also prompted by Karen as well. So thank you. I still stand by thinking that was the case because I can't picture it being off Paige when he stole her memory.
No, I don't think so.
But I have to make some assumptions there to make it work. And those assumptions would be that Colonel Atos could have used the military network to have someone closer place the lure. But logistically, again, I'm having to make concessions to make that work.
What's Colonel Atos's signet? Do we know?
Oh, that's intriguing. I gotta look it up.
He might have a signet that makes something like that easier. I don't think this is true. But what if the him that all the Venom are referring to is someone like Colonel Atos, who is hiding in plain sight. I don't know.
Ooh, so you're saying it wouldn't be the sage referenced there. It would be
Or what if he
someone
is?
else.
What if he is very powerful?
I could see him being a Venin,
Yeah.
but, you know, it gets so messy thinking
It
about
does.
what people's motives are. Because if we go based off him having kind of similar motives to General Sorengale, but then again, I do question if she's a Venin. I don't know. But maybe he's a Venin and he could teleport.
I think that his morals and intentions are a lot worse than General Sorengale's ever were.
I think that it also gets worse after he's reprimanded for setting the Marked Ones up in Iron Flame. I think he is setting up to be a pretty big bad. Not the biggest. I think that's going to be, but maybe he is like a higher Venin leader, but I don't know. I think the highest one is going to have to be someone who has had all the time in the world to devote to structuring out this recruitment system.
That's true. It couldn't be him.
I don't know. It's very intriguing, but I did look it up and his signet is unknown. We don't know.
Okay.
He could be a distance wielder. It's not supposed to be common, and I really stand by Garrick being the distance wielder.
Yeah.
But who knows? Interesting. Back to Liam's family crest crate. That's suspicious. And it seems like a random addition to this chapter because, one, why would that be there at this now enemy village? What purpose did it play in this scene if it wasn't the lure? It doesn't have a purpose. And it doesn't get mentioned in Iron Flame that I know of.
Yeah.
Whereas the lure does. I do wonder if it is connected to the epigraph for chapter 35 that explained how Resin was at many points a part of Navarre, which I'm thinking could have been left behind there specific, but I don't really know Liam's family history. Like, was that part of their, I don't know. But regardless, it will come back up in future books, and I imagine it will be significant in relation to Sloane.
Right.
All right, now I have to point out that the Venin immediately knew to be afraid of Violet's lightning. The first time she summoned Bolt, the Venin looked at the sky and looked at Violet and then started channeling magic from the earth. Now, we know there must have been at least one lightning wielder before Violet because Professor Carr knew of that signet. But we had questioned previously on our pod whether Violet being able to kill a Venin with her lightning was unique to her as a pure power signet versus anyone who can wield lightning being able to kill them. It's not necessarily electricity that could kill them so much as being killed by the very thing that they're corrupt with, which is pure power.
Yeah.
So this is confirmation to me that whatever lightning wielder that came before must have been able to kill Venin because they knew to be scared of it, essentially. No matter what, it does make me wonder what the backstory is there for the Venin. This would have been at least a century ago, the last lightning wielder. So I imagine that is their own sort of lore passed down between Venin to be afraid of lightning, to know that can kill them.
Right. And we talked about the stories, the fables of
the Baron.
Fables of the Baron. They kind of turned into like our version of the boogeyman, but now Violet is the monster under the Venin's bed.
Yeah.
And this is definitely at least part of why they want her on their side, because if she's on their side, it's so much less of a threat to them.
That's what makes it so suspicious is like they likely know that a dragon can choose to unbond a Venin. So if they got her to channel, something else is unique about her and special about her other than her power through Tarn. Because he could choose to unbond and then she no longer has that access to that power. So like they keep talking about commanding the sky and wanting to keep her alive because of that. But that seems deeper than just the signet she gets from a dragon who can unbond her and she won't have that anymore. If that makes sense. Like,
yeah,
she's special in other ways.
Oh, 100%.
Which goes back to her hair and all those theories that are swirling. Next on our list, Liam wielding ice. On page 463, quote, Liam flies for the griffins above us, wielding spears of ice into the injured wyvern's throat. Liam is supposedly a far sight signet. So strange that he's over here wielding ice. Importantly, Day's name translates to ice. I had heard that Liam was an ice wielder in the first draft and that Rebecca changed it and then missed this in edits, but I couldn't find where Rebecca said this herself, so I cannot confirm that. I did, however, come across a Reddit thread with a comment specific from Gabbemel, so Gabbemel, that says, quote, in Iron Flame, it is Sloane that drops the info that when a dragon bonds a rider, that is a direct descendant of their previous rider. The rider will either develop a second signet or go mad. Why would Sloane have this info? I think it was in Liam's letters, and that's how she knows this. Ooh. End quote. I really like this theory.
I do too.
In the same Reddit thread, Romance Rants said, quote, Ice is Liam's signet, and he covered up his real power. His mother was the best rune maker in Tyrrendor. It's safe to assume she taught Liam at least some of what she knew. When Violet was learning runes, one of the first things she made was a hearing rune. An eyesight rune probably takes the same, small, amount of skill. Why would Liam hide his true power? Leadership are the people who murdered his parents and are engaging in a massive cover-up. If there is ever another war, the best tactical advantage Liam can give himself is the element of surprise and not let his enemy know he has an offensive signet or how powerful it is. End quote.
Wow.
I know I love how creative these theories get. And I will say I like both of these theories more than a writing error, right? And Rebecca honestly could easily use one of these to cover up the error if she wanted to. And we will find out. We just got to keep reading. Next, now this one is a callback. We totally should have known Jack was not dead because Violet's logic in this set of chapters was, quote, no one could survive the avalanche of rock. But in this set of chapters, Violet also thinks there's no way anything survived that blast. And out comes the wyvern and the venom that did, in fact, survive the blast. So I think this was a clue, and it was also a clue that Jack was venom because it showed that an avalanche of rock would not kill venom.
Wow.
When I tell you, I said, when I read it this time. Should have known. So this next one is partially just for morbid giggles. But Violet comments on a wyvern flying by with a human leg hanging out of its teeth. And guys, I am down bad trying to pick up foreshadowing. Because my first thought when I read this was that foreshadowing Sawyer at the end of Iron Flame?
Oh my gosh.
I think I've Easter egged a little too close to the sun.
Easter egged too close. Oh goodness, poor Sawyer.
I know. Anyways, when Violet is poisoned, the ends of her hair are referred to as being duller. Now, it also turned her blood black, which in itself seems significant, but could have just been showing that she was visually draining of all magic, right? But even that tells me that the poison that cut off her magic is also related to magic itself. Maybe even to whatever magical reason she has silver hair.
Right, because why else would that dull whenever her
and specifically the ends, not all of her hair?
Yeah.
It was referenced as the ends.
Wow.
Next, in the last chapter, Xaden thinks, quote, I keep my shields up, trying to respect her privacy as I walk to her side, but gods, I need to know what she's thinking. Karen sent me this text message. She was so excited because she'd read this set of chapters before I got a chance to. Oh my gosh. I feel wrong just saying it out loud. Do you want to take on the rest or you want me to keep going?
Yeah, okay, I'll go.
Yeah.
Because at first you think that this has to do with their bond communication, but he is saying this because she won't respond to him out loud, which means she wouldn't respond to him through their bond either. So this was 1000% a reference to his intrinsic ability.
Which is so obvious.
So
right?
Obvious. When I texted you, I was like, how did we not see this before it was right in our faces?
I really chalked it up to the bond. I really did. Like, it doesn't make sense when you break down the logic, but it was so obvious. We have talked about how in Xaden's bonus POVs, we've gotten these references to him not being able to use his intrinsic ability if the shields were up. And I've wondered if that was something that was going to stay consistent, or if Rebecca was just using that specifically in the meantime so that we wouldn't see.
Yeah.
But
it was consistent.
It's consistent. It was from the very first chapter she wrote of it, and she's used it multiple times. It is crystal clear Xaden cannot use his intrinsic ability if his own mental shields are up.
It makes sense when you think about that, too, because if you have shields around your own mind, how are you going to go into other people's?
Right. Well, and it also, you know, the whole thing about like when you play with time travel in your book, like things get wonky because there becomes inconsistencies. Like if they time traveled to this point, why would they not time travel to this point and fix that problem way back in the last couple books? Similar with this, like if Xaden was always able to read minds and intentions, they would never have any surprises. He would just know immediately. So there's things that he can't know, like Dane stealing Violet's memory. He didn't know that because he says he always shields around Dane. So it fixes a plot hole. Yeah. And finally, we get our first clue about Kat from Garrick, who tells Xaden, quote, Serena is alive, if that's what you're asking. So is her sister, but the rest, ... Now, this implies that Kat was there at Resen. Maybe she fought, maybe she left before, but it's strange because to my knowledge, Kat is never referenced as having been there in Iron Flame and acts as if she'd never seen Violet before. I suppose she didn't necessarily have to see her there, but it's interesting that this never had any follow-up reference. As I'd caught that this was a reference to Kat on my second read, but I didn't until this one put together that would have meant that she was there.
Oh, that's interesting. Did she fight with them or did she leave? Did all the Griffin flyers fight or
did some flee? I mean, would they have fled at the first? I mean, she's a student. It also doesn't make a lot of sense that she's there at all because she's a student. But then again, I guess we don't really know what the Griffin Flyer school year schedule is.
True.
They're a lot more relaxed, right? Like, don't they get like way more breaks and it's more of like this?
They don't die every day.
Right. Like it's not as rigorous. So maybe she was just visiting with Serena and that happened. But it's just, there's some suspicious, there's some holes around that, I think.
Yeah. You guys, that wraps up all 18 episodes of our deep dive on Fourth Wing through the lens of Iron Flame. As always, but especially today, thank you so much for listening. Keep an eye out for our Onyx Storm lead-up episodes. You can find updates on what's to come before our Onyx Storm season that will start in February over on our socials. Be sure to join our Instagram broadcast channel or our Discord to be the first to know.
Yes, and as we've discussed before, if you are looking for ways to support us so we can continue to make high-quality content, please leave us a review, check out our Patreon, give us a follow over on socials, and share with all of your Fourth Wing friends.
You started tear up is going to get me. Stop it. As always, we encourage you to email us all of your thoughts, theories, and suggestions. Drop them below if you are watching on YouTube or join us over on our Discord.
Until next time, dearest fantasy readers.
We just wrapped our first season.
That's crazy. Oh my gosh. I think I'm gonna cry.
Have you stopped crying this whole
episode? I think there was a second or two in there.
Yeah. It was more like a start and stop thing.
Yeah. Yep. Wow. I am so excited to jump into Onyx Storm stuff though. I'm ready to go.
Oh my gosh.